or their day camps, because the workshops start at like $70 up to $150, and the day camps can be $200-300. So when we do them, I want to try to keep the cost at like $20, so any kids can come that might have an interest, because I think there are a lot of kids out here who have that interest, who either can't afford to, or the time commitment is huge to drive all the way to Greensboro or Winston-Salem, whereas here it would be so close for them. So that's part of my goal, is I really want to make it affordable. And then, of course, to provide things for everyone in the community to come and see, and I hope, in years to come, maybe we can expand it, everybody. But for this grant in particular, the focus was for children, so that's where we thought we should start.
I have a question. So you're saying that these aren't just Summerfield children, the area children, you're going to bring in children from everywhere?
Well, it would be open because it's a community, because it's a community thing. You can't restrict. No, what you can do is charge a different fee, and that's what there would be like Michael talked about, the non-resident fee for the fishing tournament. And so we can certainly charge a different fee for children coming from other areas. But primarily we'll target our children. But just like in Greensboro, they don't turn away kids from, who want to come from anywhere else. So, hopefully.
Plus the funds from the United Arts Council.
Yeah.
They want to give the funds to a children's program that would serve the Northwest. So we wouldn't restrict it to just Summerfield.
Yeah, they very much are looking.
So this is a funded grant only. Summerfield taxpayers aren't paying for this. It's a grant.
There's $4,000. The grant that was submitted, which the council approved last week, it includes a $4,000 budget item to cover the performances that they mentioned that they want to do anyway, but were brought under the budget of the grant, so to demonstrate to the grant funding agency that there was funds involved. But if the grant doesn't get funded, then that all goes by the wayside, and the only thing that gets done is the traveling programs. The request then becomes just the traveling programs and a single event, a main stage event.
Okay, I still don't understand. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
All right.
That's my first time.
It's
So
okay. I know. It's okay.
Yeah, it's been hard.
It's all
It's
confusing.
very confusing at the council
What,
meeting.
the Parks and Rec, if there was no grant involved at all, then the Parks and Rec Committee is requesting $8,000 to do two basic programs. One is a specific master, or what they call main stage theater, where the whole production is done start to finish on site, the rehearsals, etc. Then there's another component of that to bring theater groups that already exist and do a series of theater programs.
Okay.
That was already planned in their budget. The grant came along, and the grant funds all the workshops, two more theater programs, and augments some of the activities that, like when they do the Halloween program and things of that nature. In order to demonstrate to the funding agency that there were funds coming from the town, $4,000, was it the main stage theater or the main stage?
The touring.
The touring portion, the $4,000 that was set aside, that was already going to be funded under the touring section, was slid underneath the grant to demonstrate that there was town funds involved. So that when the submission went in, there was a request for $21,000 and change from the granting agency, and then they saw a series of other things such as donations, workshop fees, in-kind donations, and then town funds, $4,000. So the grant itself is a total package of like $33,000 or $31,000, something like that. But then you back out all those other things, and you get $4,000 of that would be town funds. If the grant is not approved, then the only thing that they're requesting is the $8,000 total, $4,000 for the traveling programs, $4,000 for the main stage program. The problem with all of this is that while the grant had to be submitted ahead of time, it doesn't get funded until July 1. So that's, makes things difficult for our purposes from a funding point of view from our side. But essentially what's happened is that council's already made the decision to fund $4,000 of Parks and Recreation if they get the grant.
So in a really quick, down and dirty nutshell, the committee asked for $8,000 in this budget, and what they proposed when they went for the grant was to take $4,000, what they were asking for, and put it under the grant, so that it looks like the town is giving $4,000 towards the workings of the grant. So it looks like the town is contributing to the grant process. So that's pretty much what they did, was took $4,000 out of what they asked for in this budget and moved it under this budget instead.
Yeah, we're asking for the same amount, it's just been shifted, yeah, because if you don't, one of the things they look for in the grant is they're like, well, if we're the only ones you're coming to for 100% of your support, why? And they said that in the meeting, they're like, why would you, why aren't you looking for other sources? So we wanted to show that there was some support. And since it was something we already were gonna do, it made sense to say, well, we're already trying to do this, so let's just shift it to show that support, but we're not really adding anything to it, if that makes sense. It's been really complicated.
Yeah, doing a grant budget was a real experience, putting the in-kind
Yeah.
donations in and the fees for the workshops and a fundraiser and everything to make it look the way it needs to appear to a grant funder.
And let me just clarify this, anybody who attended the council meetings too, because I know there was some confusion with the gross versus the net, and I just want to clarify. When the grant budget was proposed initially, it was proposed with net. Like, what would so for instance, if we said an event was gonna cost $1,000, that was the net cost, because maybe the event was really gonna cost $3,000, but we were gonna get $2,000 in donations. So when the grant was first presented, it was presented with the net cost of the grant. Well, when it actually had to go in for the grant process, it had to show the cost gross and net. So we had to show gross revenues and gross expenses, and so that's why there were some differences.
The numbers didn't match.
The numbers didn't match from the initial one to the actual grant documentation. Just to clarify for anybody that was a little confused, that anybody's been following the process from start to finish here.
It's been a big learning process.
And it's kind of the same way our budget is. We have to show revenues and our expenses separately, so we can't net something. So if when you see in the budget that something's gonna cost $10,000, that's $10,000 in expenses, and it may actually be zero cost to the town, because we're gonna show $10,000 in revenues and $10,000 in expenses, so the net effect is zero to the town. But when you look at the financials, you're actually gonna see 10 and 10. So if you look at the expenses by themselves, you're not getting the whole picture, because you're thinking, oh, this is costing the town 10, when actually it may cost the town 0. It's just you have to look in the revenue section as well. So just to clarify, that's how we put the budget together, and that's how some of this happens, so nobody gets confused.
Well, thank you. That makes more sense to me.
Okay.
I try to speak up at council meetings, and sometimes it gets lost in what I'm trying to say, but to clarify some of those things, because I know it gets confusing.
Thank you.
Okay, on the next item, movies in the park. Let me give you a little background on this. People have come to Spark and asked for art in the park, music in the park, movies in the park, all of which take a lot of organization to make that project happen. So we chose to start with, this year, movies in the park. As we investigated that, we discovered that it costs at least a minimum of $1,000 per night that you put on a movie because of the royalties and the equipment involved. So we were fortunate to have an outside group approach us saying they would like to do movies in Oak Ridge, Kernersville, and here. And that they would raise the money, rent or buy the equipment, and put on a series. That's the way we would like to go, is let them do that, in which way we would have probably just some minimal advertising cost involved. They're having trouble getting up and getting started. So we'll see whether that happens. As a backstop,